So, welcome, and what I want to do is take you through, sorry, about the first 2 centuries of Hampden-Sydney, and the way it's set up. I got 18 lectures, and I think I can condense that to 14 and get comfortably into one semester without overlapping any. But that's only about a decade per lecture, and more has happened here and more has gone on than you have any idea. You can't find out about most of it for reasons which we'll get to about Thanksgiving. Hampden-Sydney records have been destroyed. But anyway, what I want to do in the meantime today, it does not have a lot of Hampden-Sydney in it. It's why the Presbyterians wanted to have a college and why they wanted it here in Prince Edward County, which they specifically did. And I can lead you through that, but it'll be the last slide we get to before you see why we're here. Beginning next week, it will be all about Hampden-Sydney and the evolution of the college. So anyhow, the one thing I want to do before I start is to give you a statistic that is real and absolutely numerically correct, but it's sort of a kludge, and I won't blame you for it being insulted, but it also has some usefulness. Hampden-Sydney is the oldest college in the United States that still uses the name it had at its founding and still has its educational focus the same as when it was founded. And that sounds pasted together with tape. And it is, except it says that over the years, if you don't change your name and you don't change your method of instruction, you must have been doing the big things right. You will see, if you keep coming to this, you will see a bunch of little things that we really didn't do right. But the big things we did right, the good men and good citizens, it's as good a line now as it was when Samuel Stanhope Smith used it 250 years ago. So with that, and urging you to keep that in mind as the semester wears on, let me go on here. So what I'm going to do is cover the college from its founding to about 1975. That's a good place to stop getting information, and everything since then is current events. So we really don't need to worry too much about that. You probably didn't realize color photography existed in 1770, but there you are.
Talk a minute. Since I'm at the yellow part, it's right here.
Are you gonna do this or not? There we go. Go back. Okay. This is a double-page spread from the 1975 catalog, which did not have a computer edition, and so the double-page spread is why there's a white streak down the middle. I have and colored in. This is as if you were taking a drone photograph from a drone that was over the back parking lot to Bort's Library, okay, and looking off toward the football field. I've colored in the buildings. If they're red, the building is still there and is still the same shape it used to be. And you'll recognize Gilmer and Maples and Cushing. I mean, all the red ones are recognizable. The yellow ones have either been torn down or replaced by something else, or they have been added to in such a way that the building is no longer the same shape, even if it's doing the same thing, okay? The photograph will look different if you make it now. And there are 2 green ones on there, which have been torn down and grass was planted. Over to the right is a sort of L-shaped green building, which was the entire buildings and grounds operation. It was a disaster, and it was so good to see that go. On the other hand, the other green that is all the way over to the left side, that was the college's first serious dining hall, and it was kind of too bad to see that go. We'll get to that. Down here on the right is a little map that the college put in to tell you how to get to campus. And I-95 is there, and I-81 is there. You know, we'll come back to that too. Now, that's the time front end and time back end of what we're going to do. Why did the college, why did the Presbyterians in Virginia need a college? Separately, why did they need it here, but why did they need one at all? And it goes back to this word, which is a perfectly good English word, probably not in the active vocabulary of anybody here. If you're a Scot, you'll recognize it. If you're not a native Scot, you probably won't. As soon as the Romans got out of Great Britain in 400, the Saxons started sailing from northwest Germany to eastern England and settling the place. And that lasted until 700 when the Saxon exodus stopped. So somewhere in there, a Gaelic-speaking Scot met a Saxon and said, "Who you?" And the Saxon said, "Saxon." And Sassenach is as close as the Gaelic language lets you come to Saxon, okay? Hey, I tried. And ever since then, they've been called Sassenachs. Okay, that's an English to a Scot, except it's worse than that. The definition says often used disparagingly. No, it's always used disparagingly, and furthermore, disparagingly is not nearly a vigorous enough word. This represents a fundamental dislike. Scots, there's a mixture of dislike and distrust in there. The Scots think that English will cheat them every chance they get. And the lack of trust has gone on for, if you think about the time scale, 1,500 years now. It's not going to change. The English feel the same way about the Scots. There's a level of contempt built into this. If you stop somebody on the street in Edinburgh and just say you're from the United States, and what can they say about Scotland? Somewhere in the first paragraph, they will tell you that Scotland had 4 universities when England only had 2. And we hold England in permanent contempt. But the upshot of this is that since England is usually about 5 times the population of Scotland, that England doesn't look the offspring. And when Scotland protests, England says, take it and put it where the sun don't shine. And this leads to hard feeling. And when you get to the colony of Virginia, where the government included the established Anglican church, it turns out that you have to get government permit to build a church. And if you apply for a permit to build a Presbyterian church, we have to mail that to the bishop, who is in London. And he will rule on whether you can build a church. And no Anglican bishop is ever going to vote to let you build a Presbyterian church. And so there's a real problem here. But we'll see more about that.
I'm gonna put it back in. Left side.
There we are. Okay, let me take you through a timeline for the formation of Virginia and work up to where we need Hampden-Sydney next. 1600, Elizabeth is still on the throne, but she's in bad shape, and there are not any little tutors running around. And a committee of very important people is formed quietly to decide who the descendant is going to be, because it ain't going to be anybody we know around here. And it turns out that the best DNA fit and the best fit in terms of demonstrated ability is James VI of Scotland, who was Henry VIII's grandson, okay? Yeah. He has a card punch. On the other hand, he's been King of Scotland for about 20 years now, and he does that pretty well, apparently. So, okay, we'll take him. 1603, Elizabeth dies, and they can't send him emails, so they send somebody up to tell him. And he starts for London. And he's been told in advance that he's the one. And he really, really wants this job. At the time he takes over in England, Scotland has a total population the same as Charlotte, North Carolina. Not the Charlotte metropolitan area, the Charlotte city limits. Okay, that's the population of Scotland. And England is the big leagues. So, boy, does he want that job. But he's got three real problems here. I mean, England is the major league of kingship, but he's got 3 strikes against him, and that kind of ruins your in the major leagues. He's a Scot, Sassanax and all that. Obviously can't be trusted. Besides that, his mother was not just a Catholic, but a gung-ho, fire-breathing Catholic. Oops. And he himself is a Presbyterian because he had to say that to be King of Scotland. In fact, he probably didn't care much one way or the other. And he is perfectly happy to become an Anglican as soon as he crosses the border into England. He takes 32 days to get to London, and most of that is spent in the prairies through cities on the way, because he's trying to find out how much trouble he's in ahead of time in terms of people being hostile and that sort of thing. And he gets a great reception. People get the band out and play and have parades and so on. And this is going well. But he has a list of things he's going to do that show his warm fuzzies as far as the Anglicans are concerned. And the first one he gets to, which I didn't get on there, is that 10 days, he's been 32 days getting to London. 10 days after he gets to London, he invents the Emmy Award, which is to say, he publishes a big proclamation that Will Shakespeare's drama group will come to the palace and receive an award for being the outstanding drama group in England. And as a reward, the drama group can put on any play they want to in any theater in London and not have to go through the state censor course. Big award. They're called the King's Men, and nobody has been called the King's anything in England for 50 years. So this is big. Costing nothing, obviously fits into public opinion. Boy, is this a good idea. But he has more substantive things in mind. The first thing he does the next year is to appoint a 30-man commission to prepare a translation of the Bible into English. In the Dark Ages, the Catholic Church did not want ordinary laymen to be reading the Bible because it's philosophically elegant and has complicated stuff in there, and you're too stupid to understand, which may well have been true. But they haven't done away with the rule. And England has seen 2 men executed for bootlegging translated English language copies of the Bible. People want a Bible, and printing is everywhere now, okay? It's 130 years since Gutenberg invented printing, hey. So we're gonna have the Bible and we're gonna make it for sale to the public, besides having it in churches. And of course, this shows up in 4 or 5 years of 30 people doing the translation. And it is, of course, the King James Version of the Bible, which has lasted 400 years now. And as I said on there, I'm convinced it is the leading political payoff of all time. So people like that helped. Then he announces that we're gonna have a colony in the New World. And we sort of tried this once before, 20 years ago, but the king wasn't backing it, and they didn't have the logistics worked out, and by the time somebody got back over, the colony was gone, and lost colony and all that. This time we're gonna do it right. This is gonna be a crown colony. And the government is gonna support it, and there's gonna be ships going back and forth all the time to keep this going. And not me, James, but the Crown offices will see to it that everybody who goes to this new colony will be English, not any kind of foreigner, and that specifically includes Scots. And they will be Anglican, and they will pledge to that effect before we let you on the boat. Not gonna have any difference of opinion in this colony. Furthermore, he's got a pretty good choice here. The Spanish are acknowledged by everybody to have Central America and the Caribbean and Florida up to about Jacksonville. And the French control a few islands in the St. Lawrence River, but that's about it. The English, essentially because they have a bigger, meaner navy than anybody else, are vaguely acknowledged to be in charge of the whole east coast of the United States. Now, the United States, if they want to be, and they never have wanted to be. So we're going to have a colony now, and what we want to do is pick it where it'll have a decent climate, so you can go over there and farm successfully. I mean, you don't want to be too far north, you don't want to be too far south. We'll try for this place in the middle that has a whopping harbor on the coast. And I'm not vain. I'm just good old James. But we're going to name it for your glorious, now expired queen, who was absolutely in charge of everything. And it's a little awkward to call it Elizabeth yet, so we'll call it, she was the Virgin Queen, and we'll call it Virgin yet. And, okay, they get to work collecting people, and it takes a while to vet everybody. But in 1607, they landed, the colony lands not in Norfolk Harbor where they should have, but they go up the river a little ways to be sure they're reasonably sure they stay out of ocean storms. And they landed at Jamestown, which is sort of an interesting.
You said we got here.
Yeah, here we are. They landed at a place that they have since called Jamestown. And everybody starts farming and free living off the natives. The next spring, this is 1807, the next spring, John Rawl takes a ship and heads for the Caribbean to buy tobacco seed from the Spanish, who discovered tobacco seed when they took over the Caribbean and have been growing it and selling it in Europe ever since. And it's really popular. Sir Walter Raleigh, in about 1590, went at the Caribbean, got some samples of cigars and loose pipe tobacco, and came back with them, and went to see the Queen, and said, "Your Majesty, you're not going to believe how nice this is." And she said, "Yeah." And he said, "Okay, you put this in your mouth and take a burning ember and set fire to the outside end of it, and then you just simply breathe through it. It's marvelous." So he does it, and she takes a very tentative breath, and it's sensational. Wow! So the next thing she does is take a huge breath and inhale it. At which point she loses her lunch, okay? And Sir Walter is looking at a short lifetime in the Tower of London, when she says, "Hey, that was really pretty good." And she liked smoking cigars so much that she had two courts. There was the male court, which did all the stuff like foreign affairs and tax levels and things like that. There was the female court, which was sit around and give me the gossip that's going around, and let's have a good time here for about an hour in the morning. And she required each of the ladies in the female court to smoke a cigar with her. Okay. Not a lot of attention drawn to that anymore, but tobacco is very addictive. Anyway, Rolfe is sure they can grow it in Virginia and that they can sell it like you wouldn't believe in England. And it's not just, well, they had smoke shops, which were a little thing like a pub, except what they would do is sell you tobacco and so on. And they got all the local newspapers out. You could read those for nothing while you smoked. But Shakespeare's daughter and her husband opened one of these in Avon, which only had about the population of Kiesel. Okay, things were everywhere. Anyway, the growing tobacco turned out to be hugely popular. Unfortunately, it's also extremely labor intensive. The seed are tiny little, and you have to plant them individually in seed flats and let them grow up to about 3 inches high, and then you have to take them out individually and plant them 2 feet apart in the field. And if you work out the size of this, if you have a square mile of tobacco, which is a big farm, I admit, but if you have a square mile of tobacco, you will plant about 600,000 or 700,000 plants in the spring. And you have to handle each one of those because they're tender, and you have to plant them very carefully by hand. And in a society that was seriously underpopulated anywhere, including at home, remember Charlotte population and all that, you got no way of handling this if you don't use the manpower reserve of the 17th century, which was black Africans. And so, in no time, Virginia became the center for black slavery in America. There was hardly any in North Carolina, hardly any in South Carolina, hardly any in Georgia. Alabama didn't exist yet. The Eastern Virginia was 40% black slaves. But they got the work done. The people on top of this, the white folks in Eastern Virginia, are making money like crazy, and they're expanding their lands as fast as they can. But what it turns out, come on. Well, one more thing. This lasts all the way through the 1600s. In 1707, exactly 100 years after the colony was formed, the British Parliament, the English Parliament, gets the Scottish Parliament by spending a lot of money on bribes, gets them to agree to merge with England and form the United Kingdom, which would be only vaguely politically interesting, except that it makes Scots potential Virginia citizens now. If you can get over there, you can get in on the tobacco boom. And so, somewhere around 75,000 Scots in the next 50 years head out for, well, someplace in Virginia, but just where is not a matter. But let's.
Got you. Well, you know what?
Sorry. Oh, there's a map here. You need this map.
Sorry, let me get out.
Yeah, well, it's your remark. The left-hand map is a geological map of the eastern United States. And I have thoughtfully put in the major cities as open circles and the small towns as solid dots. And you'll see that when they landed there, they had a lot of choice. But it turns out that the tectonic plate that represents the United States is sliding away from Europe slowly at about the rate your thumbnails grow. And it is leaving behind it a messy footprint made out of sand that has eroded off the top mountains and washed down. And so all of the cream colored stuff on the edge of the coastal edge of North America is very sandy soil. And pretty soon you get to the fall lines, which, to oversimplify this badly, the fall line is like the back edge of the tectonic plate, okay? It's where you still got some rock left. And the river comes down to that point, and there's rocks there, and it flows over the rocks, and you know, you can't sail past that point. And that's really bad, because sailing is by far the cheapest way to move stuff if you don't have railroads, okay? They did desperately want to take things places on boats. And what this came out to, if you look at that map, you can, in your own mind, put the rivers in. There's a ton of rivers down there, and every one of them has falls on that red line on the right-hand map. And that turns out to be where the sandy soil stops and the heavy clay soil starts. And the variety of tobacco that they were getting from the Spanish and then growing on their own later won't grow in clay soil. So the tobacco boom only extends as far as the fall line. And towns grew up along there because shipping being what it is, you want to sail up to the falls and land your cargo at some little town there, which can then sell it to the farmers around there or something. And so there's a town on every river in Virginia that you start with Alexandria, and then you go through, well, several of them left there, but Fredericksburg and Richmond and Petersburg and Emporia, all of those are on, each of those is on a river of its own, okay? Now, we'll get to this again in a minute, but these are towns, these are useful places to build highways when you get to that stage. What Interstate 95 does, in Virginia at least, is to follow exactly the fall line down through the state. It's the boundary between where you can't grow coffee, and where I can't grow tobacco, and where you can't grow tobacco. So the tobacco growing expanded northwest, starting in Jamestown, expanded northwest basically to Fredericksburg, wrapped around to the south and got to Richmond and then to Petersburg. Didn't go south of Petersburg very much because right along the North Carolina line in that map is the Dismal Swamp. And you ain't gonna grow anything in there. So we're not gonna fool with it. So all the tobacco land was to the north, and they expanded to the north into Maryland and grew tobacco there, and that was fine. And you can actually, the soil doesn't get to where it won't grow tobacco at all until you're about 20 or 25 miles this side of I-95, okay? And so this was all right, but here we are with all of the land up to the fall line by 1770 being owned by the English and farmed very profitably for tobacco. And you got a lot of Scots who want to live in Virginia and make money. So what we're gonna do here,
Well, actually, you're looking at this.
this is about 1700. The European settlement is the red shaded part. And you can see Virginia's red shaded back about as far as I-95, okay? North Carolina is hardly shaded at all. South Carolina hardly at all. Yeah, Charleston. Georgia we can skip, they're later. All those were crown colonies, which meant that we're only gonna let genuine Englishmen go there. Pennsylvania was different, and it's the only one that was. Because not being coastal, it was a little later getting given away. And William Penn Sr. was the chief admiral for the British Navy while it was building up to be the strongest navy in the world. And he was getting paid like an admiral, except that somehow they didn't get the check written. And he went years without getting a paycheck. Well, he had his own money and he didn't care too much, so he let it go. But when he finally retired, he said, "You really do have to pay me now." And they said, "We don't have that much money around." And he said, "So what are you gonna do?" And they said, "Well, I'll tell you what, you can have all of this property in here, which we don't call Pennsylvania yet, but it'll get to where you can call it Pennsylvania. You can have all of that, and you can sell the land." And he said, "I'm not in the real estate business." And they said, "Well, we can work something out." And while this was working out, he died. And William Penn Jr. showed up. He's a Quaker, which means he is not in the Navy and is not going to fight anybody about anything. He is very tolerant. He is also a car dealer at heart. And he takes a trip for Eastern Europe, which has just finished the 30 Years' War, which absolutely devastated Germany. It was settled by dividing up Europe between states that were going to be Lutheran because that's what the Duke did or became, and states that were going to be Catholic because that's the way God intended it. Presbyterians didn't get anything out of this. The Church of the Brethren didn't get anything out of it. Mennonites didn't. Calvinists didn't. They were still getting discriminated against the way they always had. And 2/3 of them were dead besides. So Penn Jr. takes a trip through Eastern Europe, recruiting people to come to Pennsylvania. And he will sell them lots so they can farm there, and nobody cares what your religion is. Which is why all of southeast Pennsylvania is now German. Professor Sutton will be happy to testify to that. They got there first. If you're gonna sail over there and you don't have any money, then you wanna go the cheapest way you can, which turns out to be a Scottish shipping line, a passenger trip on the Scottish shipping line. The Scots were lots cheaper than the English were. And the Scots, during the 1600s, couldn't let people off in Norfolk because they weren't allowed to. These people were very non-English and non-Anglican, okay? No, you're not gonna do that. So the Scottish ships didn't try for Norfolk. Instead, they shortened the trip a little bit and went up the river to Philadelphia and let people off in Philadelphia. Well, so, okay, so far so good.
Often.
Oh, well, that's a modern English cigarette package, which shows that even after 400 years, they still advertise that every bit of tobacco that's processed in England is being Virginia tobacco.
Come on. I'm gonna sign it.
Okay, here's a map of how Scots and Scots-Irish got into the United States. And the green line over here is the Scotch, and to some extent Dutch, they were also cheap, line coming down here, skipping Norfolk entirely, which there's not even an arrow going to Norfolk. They skip that entirely and go in here up to Chester and Philadelphia and let people off in Philadelphia, and the Quakers are happy to see them. And you got two choices. You can start going west, and there's all of central Pennsylvania that you can land in, and a lot of them did that. Huge Pennsylvania Presbyterian population, but a lot of them wanted to go to Virginia, which was why they got into this in the first place. And the way you do that is to go to Gettysburg and turn left, okay, and head down the Shenandoah Valley, which at the time was the Great Philadelphia Wagon Trail and became I-81, all right? So Virginia gets populated from two directions, from the southeast slowly, and that's almost over because we've already bought all the tobacco land, and from the north, and that's pretty quick. And these are people who have heard the word and are pretty sure they're not going to be able to grow tobacco anyway, and they're going to grow other stuff.
I don't want. Here we are.
This is ethnic immigration. About the time Hampden-Sydney is being founded. And the Scotch-Irish are the light blue-green color, and they have pretty well populated everything past the orange, which is German population in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania. But they've also populated, you see that white finger that reaches up toward Maryland? That's the Blue Ridge. And they have populated down the Shenandoah Valley, but they've also populated the east side of the Blue Ridge, all the way down to kind of where, you know, like Hampden-Sydney is, and on into North Carolina. That pinky purple part is where the African slaves were, and
That, well,
that's history we're looking at. These are I really need a laser pointer here, but anyway, these are the dates when towns were chartered in Virginia. they're not the settlement dates because settlement dates tend to be legend. Somebody came here and built a log cabin in 16 whatever. The charter dates for the towns are a matter of record, and they're always as soon as anybody can possibly do it, because you have to have a charter to be able to charge taxes for public services. So nobody sits around and waits to get their charter. Everybody gets their charter right away, and here we are. Norfolk gets its charter in 1682. Williamsburg in 1722. Interesting delay there. Fredericksburg 1737, Richmond in Fredericksburg 1728, Richmond 1737, Petersburg 1748, and the tobacco growing spread north and northeast, and so Alexandria 1749, but like over at Winchester, right at the top of the blue-gray area. This is the first place in Virginia you get to when you're headed south looking for farmland down the Shenandoah Valley. It's incorporated in 1744. Front Royal, which is where you have to decide which side of the Blue Ridge you're going to choose, is 10 years later. Culpeper 1759, Charlottesville 1762, Farmville, which people were not terribly interested in, 1798. But you can see how population spread down the state. Over on the valley, you go from Winchester in 1744 to Stanton only 3 years later. Okay, and then it slows down. Lexington in 1777, Big Lake or Roanoke was 1802, but Abingdon, which was an easy trip to get down, is 1777. So you can see how Virginia is filling up from the top to the bottom, and basically. Let's go back to this map that was in the catalog from 1975. You see the I-95 line, which at this point we know is English Anglicans to the right side and Scotch Presbyterians to the left side. And I-81, which is the way you get down the valley. And the college has talked with Mark Hampden-Sydney and so on, which might not be another map. But here's the same map, except that I've marked sort of the limits of Scotch-Irish penetration into Virginia from the north. They can't get east of I-95 because the land's all been sold. They can't get more than a few miles west of I-81 because you're in serious mountains. It spreads down, and by 1774, it's past Roanoke, it's down into North Carolina a little ways. It is not over to the Dismal Swamp yet, okay? But the yellow border is a decent indication of where the Scotch-Irish Presbyterians are in Virginia. And note the red dot. This is why, they didn't have decent maps, but they still knew where people lived. But the position of that red dot is why this college is where it is. Because land travel is really hard. Walking, you get 3 miles an hour. A walking horse gives you 4 miles an hour. A trotting horse gives you 8 miles an hour, but that requires a good road. And the phrase good road would have sent everybody in Virginia off into streams of curses. Okay. Land travel is just really, really hard. And that's why the Presbyterians wanted to put it in the single Presbyterian population as much as they could. And what I would go on to point out here is something interesting. It's 1774. We're about to have the American Revolution. When we do, Virginia is the most populous state, and it's a big contributor of patriots, heroes. If you look at most low-level history books, they will list 8 Virginia patriots: Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, John Marshall, True, George Mason, George Wythe, and Old Foot.
Henry.
Henry, thank you, very good. Of those 8, 7 lived on or west of I-95. 1 lived in the guaranteed English part of the state, George Wythe. But it is kind of interesting to see that you can sort of predict politics on the basis of things like, how many times have you called me a Sassenach? So, let me give up here. Well, I really need to give up. Next week, which will be here again, we originally thought we were going to have to move up, but Rebecca has fixed that for us, and we're going to be in this room again Tuesday, 11:30. And at that point, I want to start talking about how you, once you know you want to put a college where the red dot is, how do you set up a college from ground zero? What do you have to do? What can go wrong? Hint, it all did go wrong. But I want to talk about how the college got started next week. So, thanks very much, and see you then.